Hello and welcome to Movie Buffs, a show about the free press, the thrilling world of investigative journalism, and when bodies of power are actually held accountable. I'm your host, Shani B.
So in other words, like a fictional story, right? At least in 2026,
Right, a world that no longer exists,
exists. Yeah.
unfortunately.
And I'm your other host, Cisco from Misfit Minded.
Each episode, we check the gate and break down movies from all genres, new and old, from major franchises to indie darlings. And today, we're talking about the 1976 film, All the President's Men. But before we get started, it's a Robert Redford film, so I kind of want to just talk about him briefly as an actor. He closed out the In Memoriam at the Oscars, so he's important to the industry. And I guess I was curious, he's kind of OG, so I wondered, if you have a relationship to him or his movies.
I'm not gonna lie, I do not have a
Fair.
huge relationship.
Totally fair.
I guess I'll just say off the top, like this was my first time seeing this movie as well.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and it's not because I'm not interested. It's always been on my list on my watch list. Listeners of this show probably know I've said this probably a bunch, but like my dad, for as big of a movie fan as he is, his, sweet spot was like 80s movies, horror movies, and horror movies that like occasionally dipped into the 70s, but like anything past that, which is like 50 years of movies that I'm like catching up to now, like in my 30s, I had not like grew up with, or like, and so Robert Redford, unfortunately, like his time as a movie star was just not a time that went in my dad's like collection or like things that would have been available to me.
Fair.
I actually have like more of a history with Dustin Hoffman, I guess, because he kind of broadened out and still worked when I was like growing up, so like
Yes.
Meet the Fockers was like a big like, okay, Dustin Hoffman, but then I have seen The Graduate or whatever because I knew that was like a staple of like
Mm-hmm.
70s cinema and things like that. So yeah, I guess I just have more of a relationship with him. Rain Man, I remember I saw that like quite maybe in high
Let's
school.
go. Yeah.
So a bunch of those, like he has his more like signature roles. I've seen those. And Robert Redford, I guess this would be like one of his signature roles, right? I guess I just haven't
Right.
had I haven't seen him. So what about you though?
Similar, I have a little bit of a relationship to him, but when he was making movies in the 90s, they were like a little sleepier for me. They were like The Bridges of Madison County, Up Close and Personal, another investigative journalism movie with Michelle Pfeiffer that I remember from the 90s, but they weren't like, his pivotal characters. And I do feel, I agree, it's sort of like, like my parents would, they talked about him, but like they weren't necessarily like, oh, let's rewatch, these Redford pictures. They were just always like, oh, what a great actor he is. And that's like full stop. But Dustin Hoffman, I feel like was like, he was all over the 90s, still making lots of different movies. I think, one of my favorite Dustin Hoffman movies is Sphere with Sharon Stone and Samuel L. Jackson, sort of
Okay.
like sea creature, thriller, a sci-fi thriller that I loved. So I do have a little bit more of a relationship to him, but it was really fun revisiting this. I watched this kind of like right around the pandemic, like right before the
I was just gonna
pandemic
say,
started, and through the pandemic, I got like really into being like, you know what? I'm about to watch movies from the 1930s on. I think I'm just going to go ahead and do that, with my free time. And then I had a whole lot of free time. So I got to this one
nice.
because just like you, it was always on my list. And I remember being like, it's really interesting and it's a good one. And it's just an interesting one to revisit as a pivotal movie. So I'm curious to kind of see as we have a discussion about it today, like how it feels to like watch it for the first time today. Because I was really like being reminded of it when I was rewatching it for this talk.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's funny you say that because one movie I had never seen that I watched during the pandemic that has Dustin Hoffman as like the top head on the poster, was Outbreak, because
So good.
because that was like in my sicko. We're in a pandemic. Let me watch all these like
Of course.
virus movies and like prepare myself in the the worst way. But I mean, I don't know.
Stellar
That's
cast,
how I
too.
deal with it. You know what I mean? I know I wasn't the only one. You know what I mean? Like I've talked to
Why else
several
is
people.
art a thing, right? We
Yeah.
need to use it to get through real life.
So like that one, Contagion, I'm just like, anything that can prepare me for what's to come, I'm gonna seek it out.
Be ready. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, exactly. Like he was really just kind of working a lot in the 90s and in movies that when I'm like a kid, of course I'm going to want to watch because I am looking for those action movies, those thrillers, those ones that are like kind of getting me scared. And I'm certainly not like trying to watch rom-coms or like dramas
Right.
necessarily.
Yeah, and like I guess Paul Newman is like another name that like if you asked me like what am I familiar with his work, I would say no. Say like kind of in that same vein
Right.
of
I
like
might try to
Robert
take a
Redford.
guess, but I don't think I would nail it?
I guess one of the funny parts of just like again, just on my like brief knowledge on the two actors that it is kind of funny that Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman are the two leads because like Dustin Hoffman is known as more of the like getting lost in the role, like,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah,
you
type
know,
guy. Mhm.
and I do not get that vibe from Robert Redford. He kind of just seems like I'm a movie star who's going to show up and just like
He
perform on the day,
He's giving
like,
yeah, he's giving Brad Pitt and, like,
mhm.
there's that same style quality of, like, I'm pretty secure in the way I've decided to play this character, and, like, that's enough for me?
Yeah, and I mean, they got like a lot of comparisons. I remember like when Brad Pitt's star was rising, that like people are like, "Oh, Robert Redford's like passing the torch down." I do think a
Seriously.
lot of that is just because of like they're both like good looking and
They
like
fully resemble each other, like,
yeah,
fully.
like could be father and son. They even did that movie Spy Game, which I thought was like decent. It
Yep.
was fine, but like
Yeah.
I do think Brad Pitt's like a better actor. Like he's like a character actor like we're talking about that just like happens to be like super
So
handsome. You
good
know what I
looking at the
mean?
same time,
And
right?
Robert Redford's like we're talking about like my name's going to be on the poster and like people are going
Yeah,
to
I'm
show up to
just
this
magnetic.
because it's a Robert Redford movie and I'm not going to be like veering too far outside of that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I did see he did another one called 3 Days of the Condor, which is also sort of like a political kind of thriller, and I do remember, like, feeling the same way, sort of being like, it's true, it's like he's not really, like, being different men, but there's just something about, like, he is able to kinda capture an intensity, and we'll sort of talk about that in, like, the variation of the way each of them play these men, during this experience in their life, because these are real guys that they're playing who were, like, fully like present and alive and like able to like comment on the performances, be present for that stuff. So that's always interesting too when you like do a biopic that like is pretty fresh in terms of history, like they didn't make this movie 30 years
I was
after
just
it
going to say
happened. They
this
made it
one's
like
like
4 years
yeah.
after.
Like, it would be like doing, like, a 9/11 movie, like, this, like, really close to when that happened, and I think that,
Exactly.
like, informed some of the decisions in, like, the script, especially with the ending, which we
Right.
can talk about, that,
Mhm.
like, may be confusing to people, like, especially younger
Yes.
people that don't know about Watergate, that are like, "Wait, what? Like, what happened?" I
Yes.
was definitely thinking about that. I was also thinking of, like, who else is, like, kinda similar, like, Harrison Ford. I think
Mhm.
is in that Robert Redford vein of like,
Yeah.
even though he's in a lot of different genre movies like Star Wars and things like that, like he's pretty much Harrison Ford. Like
Yeah, he just has the magnetism and that's enough.
he's the stoic, kind, and he'll do like his quips or whatever here and there, but like yeah, he was like another name that I was kind of thinking of that could have played
Yes.
this part of Bob Woodward.
Before we get into this, I also wanted to ask if you had seen the 1999 film of the same story, Dick, starring Kirsten Dunst and Michelle Williams. Did you catch that when we were kids?
That's about Watergate?
Yes, it is,
Wow.
low key. I remember everything about Watergate because of that movie, because it's, like, does
Interesting.
such a good it's an amazing sort of, like, soft revisionist history thing where it's because no one one knew who the Deep Throat resource was because they hadn't been named yet. And so this movie just imagines like, what if it was two teenage girls? And it
Oh
is
my god.
so funny. Will Ferrell
Yeah.
is there. Like, there's a lot of SNL alums
Yeah, it's like a
there.
comedy, right? It's a
Yes,
straight up
it's so
yeah.
oh man, it's on Tubi, and I think I'm gonna rewatch it because when I was watching this movie, I was like, everything in this movie just makes me think of that movie because of how funny they were able to put all the same exact history that is
Mhm.
in this story into that movie in like really clever and satirical ways that are so good. Oh man, you got to see it. I can't wait for you to see it.
Yeah, I guess the movie that, I guess I had seen that most closely resemble I mean, it's about the same exact thing is The Post, which came
Okay,
with, like, Steven Spielberg did,
that's right. That's
a
right.
couple years ago, and has Meryl Streep in it and a bunch of other people. And I'm not a huge fan of the 21st century Spielberg
Mm,
movies, and so that was
different.
one that fell into that like it's just super boring. And like it was interesting to me that it's about again the Washington Post and their investigation and reporting on Watergate and like seeing what that movie did and kind of
Mhm.
failed at I found and like what this movie does which was like much more successful like
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested to hear
um
that.
yeah,
Yeah, for sure. And, when you do catch Dick, we'll be able to talk about sort of like
it was
how
always I feel like it was on
successful that
Comedy
is.
Central and I just never knew like
It's
what
so
like
good.
I caught it maybe like halfway through and I was like I just don't know what this is about like I don't
It
I
is so good.
yeah I gotta
A
watch it.
young Ryan Reynolds is there, like, looking like a
Wow.
12-year-old. It's insane. He's so young in it. But, like, it basically just it follows the same map as this movie does,
Mhm.
but, just deciding, like, rather than following how the reporters uncover it, like, following how the resource that's giving the reporters the information to cover the story, like, who that could have been, how they would have come about the information, and it's very clever.
Yeah, I mean, I was
Um,
just like, I mean, like, again, this movie, I was glad we did this, not just for like the Robert Redford of it, but because like I knew about Watergate. I was AP history in high school.
let's go.
Like I'm a huge, I would say like between journalism, I studied like starting in high school and then to college and history, which didn't really take as much in college, but it's always like fascinated me, especially like American history
Yeah.
and the myriad cover-ups and conspiracies that like are entangled in American history, which like they don't necessarily teach you in school, but
Right.
like this one definitely I feel like everyone learns about. Like it's kind of impossible not to talk about Richard Nixon and be like, why did he resign again? Oh yeah, like
That's right, that's
Watergate.
right, yeah.
And like just
Exactly.
having that familiarity with those terms like deep throw and things like that, that just again I think really helps. Like again, it might not work for younger viewers or it's so long ago now. I wonder how like younger viewers would react to this type
It's
of
true,
pace
yeah, I
and
wonder if we
story.
could find a Gen Z person, like, if they peeped
Yeah.
this movie, like, what they would say, because
Hmm.
I'm sure they would have a completely different interpretation, and honestly, I think that's why I like the movie Dick so much, because it really was like, how do we translate this to a younger audience that, like,
Mm.
needs to know this history because it's important, but also, like, is not gonna digest it the way that a 1976 audience
And I
would,
feel like
you know?
I wanted to talk about too, like I feel like it's so hard nowadays to even talk about conspiracies because like there's just
Yeah, it's
so
moved into
much
something crazier.
so much going on at one time that like it just gets lost in the shuffle. But like you hear about all these conspiracies and things that are like happening with the current administration, and it's like hard not to like look at it and be like, wow, that's kind of crazy. Why is no one talking about this? But
Because it
it's
never stops. I feel like we're
yeah,
fully
constant.
inundated, day to day with like another ridiculous thing. And I like revisiting movies like this in points of history where it's like, other generations have faced these kinds of dilemmas, but, life was different. The lifestyle, the way people reacted to things, they were within context. And I think that's why I appreciate revisiting older movies that talk about historical events, even if there's been, future iterations of it.
The
It's
inform
interesting to look at how each generation tries to digest the material.
Yeah, the information was, like, so streamlined, you had to get it from the paper, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, you couldn't just log on to, like, X or
Yeah, or
Threads
some
or
TikTok
yeah,
person who's like, "I'm gonna take you I'm gonna draw this map that is incorrect, but I'm gonna take
yeah.
you through it, and I'm gonna sound really convincing, and you're gonna believe me."
And I'm, like, always, like, even when, like, less stakes involved, like movie stuff or someone's just talking about, "Yeah, the actor actually said, like, during filming this," and I'm like, "Okay, where's the footage of the actor saying that?" Or, like, "Where's your source that you're getting that from?" You know what I mean? Like,
That's
it's
right.
just and that's what's I feel like that's what college my argument for college teaches you more than anything is, like, to always question everything and,
And to
people
cite your
using chat
sources.
cite your sources and like people using ChatGPT, it just drives me crazy because they just go there for information. I'm like, they're just gathering data online, all right? Like you could
Yeah,
just go there and see for
you could just
yourself.
do it. Right.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's wrong. Like it's like crazy.
That's the
It's like
thing too.
yeah.
People are just sort of like, I want the easy answer." And I think that's what's exciting about, a movie like this too, that sort of like shows you the dedication and the hard work it takes to like
Yeah.
uncover, real facts, to like truly lay out a series of events and not just sort of like, these, what I feel like are like how all documentaries feel today, which are sort of like, what's the most sensational part of this story? That's what we're going to focus on. And like, we're not going to do all the well-rounded, like, what was contributing to this, or why did they do this, or why are they covering this up? Like, I liked the depth of the like world building of how they had to investigate a lot of things to figure out what they were actually investigating so they
Mhm.
could write this story. And I do appreciate kind of like outlining that.
Yeah, we get like the most action. I mean, let's get into it here, but like the most action happens in like the first couple minutes when you actually see the people break into the offices,
Hmm.
and like after that, it's all just investigation and getting sources and double checking and triple checking and
Yep.
running it by the editor and calling people like, "Hey, we're gonna publish this tomorrow. Do you have anything to say?"
Hmm.
Like it goes through
It's
like
process.
the whole process, which like isn't necessarily sexy, but we can talk about like how the filmmaking and like the performances make it like so magnetic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, then let's get into it. Let
Yeah,
me
let's
give
get
you a
into
little
it.
synopsis here if you haven't seen it. Like you've probably garnered through this discussion, it is about the real life story behind the Washington Post reporting of the Watergate scandal by the journalists Woodward and Bernstein, with the help of their infamous anonymous source, Deep Throat, that ultimately led to the resignation of Nixon, but also like a bunch of other people kind of, pleading guilty to all
Yep.
kinds of different things. It's based on the book that the journalists themselves wrote.
Yep.
The screenplay was written by William Goldman. It was directed by Alan J. Pakula, who also directed The Parallax View 2 years earlier, which is also a political conspiracy film. Just a
Nice.
fun fact I wanted
Yeah,
to
I
throw
was
in there.
I was looking through his filmography too, and I was like, have I seen any of these? Only I think the only other one I had seen was Sophie's Choice, which
Oh,
yeah,
it's a good, yeah.
another
I mean, this guy's he's bona fide.
but
But you should check The Parallax View. It's a good, like, young Warren Beatty movie, and it has a pretty
mm,
surprising ending. But
all
this
right.
film won 4 Oscars, including Best Screenplay and Best Supporting Actor, and it holds a 4.2 on Letterboxd.
Mm,
Where would your rating be for it? What did you
yeah.
think of this movie when we encapsulate it in that way?
I mean, I think Letterbox is on the money, like somewhere in there, because, um, I was, telling you that before we started recording, like journalism is another thing that's like super close to my heart. Just like history, I just like fell in love with it in high school, like writing for the high school paper,
So
and
fun.
and then in college, and like just um the process of it is like I said, it's a lot of work. Like I think they do like a good job of showing like how, I mean, it doesn't. I think it gets a lot of bad rap nowadays. Like I mean, the administration now currently is always attacking the press or whatever. But like to do that job, you hold this responsibility, and like I felt that even in taking ethics class just on journalism ethics. Like that was a
Yeah.
whole course I had to take, and like your responsibility of your writing it and making sure like what you're printing from a source is exactly what they said. You're not and so when they show the editors saying like, I want another source. They already had two sources confirming this fact, this quote or whatever, this person
Mhm.
that was involved. They say I want a third source. Like that type of detail, I think they get across like really well, because and among like other things, I mean, like the shape of your story, can alter just based on like the information you get, and you have to be willing to like roll with those punches. I remember like I was doing a story on like CBD, as a market growing in Wisconsin, and
Okay.
like I wanted to talk to this guy, and like his son was like a really popular CBD distributor here, and I
Mhm.
wanted to like, and I guess there was some kind of falling out between the two of them, and I kind of wanted to like, talk to him. And like as soon as I brought his son up, he like completely like closed up on me and was like, I don't want to talk about, like, I would rather not talk about this or whatever. And like that was the first, I would say, like source that I talked to that ever like flat out like rejected me. But like, after that, I had to go back to my professor and be like, so yeah, the story I wanted to do, I'm no longer, he's not going to participate. So, and she's like, well, now you have to go with the son and like see, or change it altogether. I think I ended up just going to another business completely altogether. And
Right.
like that stuff happens, you know what I mean? So like, I think they do a good job of like, the story has to come to you in a certain way. You can have an idea, but like it's up to you to collect those pieces and like put them
Yeah.
together. And like, they even say that in the movie. Like, I feel like we have all these pieces,
But we
and
don't
we're
know what
just,
the puzzle looks like.
yeah, we're gonna look puzzled. So I think, I don't know. What do you? I think, just again, from my journalistic like background, very short, but like I thought they did a good job of getting that across.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciated it. It made me think of, how the scientific method works, right? Because
Hmm.
I'm in the social sciences, and it's sort of like when you have some idea of like what you think you want to prove with your science experiment, you start somewhere, but when you collect the data, you have to honor ethically the data. You have
Hmm.
to ethically honor the way you collect that data. You can't try to make the experiment give you the answer you want, because that is nonsense science. And so I just appreciated, again, sort of like being reminded of a time when that was like, a little bit more prominent and a little bit more valued. And then I thought of the 30 Rock joke when Jack Donaghy is asking his girlfriend, like, who is your source? Where are you getting your information? And she's like, some guy I'm sleeping with. It's a 24-hour news cycle. I don't really have time to do it right. Like they're
Yeah.
that sort of commenting on how, like, as we move into the future and the way that news is kind of like, sent out to people and digested by people, we lose this really important process that sort of keeps us ethically in a place where it's about information, it's about learning, it's about, what's the word? Critical thinking, right? Like that is
Media
important here.
literacy,
Hmm.
that's gotten really bad recently, I've noticed. And I was just going to add to what you're saying in the sciences. Even when you publish like a study or something that you found, it has to be peer reviewed after that.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's
Like, and
right.
so when
It has
people
to
are
be
like,
replicatable also, like
yeah,
someone else has to be able to replicate it that you
yeah,
have no contact with. So
and
like it has to be, it has to be real. It's not allowed to sound real, you know?
mhm. And so, like, when people, you hear that nowadays, like, well, that's just one person's, like, opinion. I'm like, actually, it's not. Like, that's the whole point of, like, you listening to, like, the experts, you know what I mean? Of, like,
Yes,
they've gone through this process already, to, like, rule out anything that could, like, be thrown against them or whatever.
that's right.
And so, yeah, like, the constant, like, checking on sources, and that was one of my favorite parts, I think, of the movie is, whenever they're talking to people, it can in some movies it can feel like a cop interrogating somebody. But
Right.
if you notice in this movie, it's really different. It's not the same. It's not good cop bad cop.
Yeah.
It's actually like, I have some of the information, and they have to be careful of like, we just have to like see what they know and test it against them and
And it's like,
hope.
help me, right? Like it's
Yes,
much more like help us,
exactly.
like we can help you by exposing the story and like, making sure that you don't have to have this on your conscience, but like it's collaborative. Essentially, we need your help to get this story out there.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite example of this is with Jane Alexander, who's the bookkeeper who got nominated for a supporting actress Oscar
Let's
for
go.
this, and I mean, well deserved. I mean, I thought all of her scenes were like really captivating, and like
Mhm.
they keep having to go back to her for this whole thing that we're talking about of like, okay, she gave us some more information, but now we got a new lead, and now we have to test that name against what she knows, like
Yep.
but like I think it's the first time when Dustin Hoffman goes over to her house and like her mom answers the door, and he kind of, the way he strategically sneaks into the house, it was
Pushes
like
his way in.
so
Mhm.
brilliant, where like she doesn't want to talk to him, and then he's like, "You have a cigarette?" And like
Yeah, can I
takes a
just,
couple steps into the house, and then she's like, "I can't talk to you." And he goes, "Do you have a match for this?" Takes a couple steps more into the house. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
that's the type of stuff that you have to do as a reporter. Like, you have to be aggressive, but like again, you can't be like a cop, like,
Yes. It's
using this
close, but
force.
not the same. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that speaks to the interesting chemistry of Redford and Hoffman here together
Mhm.
as the two different style of journalists
Yes.
that they are, right?
Yeah.
Like when they first encounter each other and Bernstein just sort of like straight up kind of inserts
Yep.
himself and is
Exactly.
rewriting it. And then, like instead of, this being about two egos, Redford's character is sort of like, listen, I think what you did is right. I just don't like the way you did it. Right. And he's sort of challenging some of the tactics he's using because he appreciates and wants the best story. He wants highest quality work. He wants this to be done right, but he doesn't want someone who's just egocentric about it. And I think another scene I think of too is when they're talking to the other woman who works at the paper with them, who went on a date with someone that she doesn't want to talk to
Oh,
anymore.
yes.
And like it could be a possible source for them. Dustin Hoffman is really pushing her, and you can see her tearing up because like there's an emotional component that's happening in terms of like why she doesn't want to talk to him. And Redford just calls it. He's like, never mind. I don't want you to do it. Like, we're not good journalists if we have to like push somebody to this point to get this
Well,
information, right? Like, there's a better way.
that's the ethics question. Like, again, I'm so glad you brought up that scene because,
So
again,
powerful.
as a journalist, are you respecting the story more or the source more? And you always want to respect the source more,
That's right.
because that's when
They're putting themselves out there.
they'll be more of a help to you in the long run. She ends up getting the list because of Robert Redford's decision to not push her further. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, I thought that was such a great example of, the ethics as a reporter, that you have to really, it's a really fine line,
Right.
that you have to always be questioning of yourself of like, is this the right thing to do, for the story?
Yes.
And so it's a struggle. Sometimes it's not clear cut. You know what I mean? Like, it's always, you always have to be, on yourself about
And
that.
yeah, I do feel like that was, like, also part of what's kind of, like, brilliant about the subtle way that they're showing you where the stakes exist in
Hmm.
this type of story, in this
Yep.
type of reporting, that, like, these are people's, like, whole lives, and it's just one story, but it's, like, a story that, some people it could be very high risk, right? Like, people, are afraid for their lives, right? They could be in danger, and so you have to think about that in yourself in the way that you do this work. And that nuance is something that I really appreciated in the filmmaking because like the score of this movie is like pretty soft. It only comes in every
Yeah.
once in a while because it's not there to sort of say like, oh, this is a part of the story that's very important, viewer. So I'm going to play this music to kind of like elicit that feeling from you. They really leave it in the performances. They really leave it in the way that the characters are relating to each other, talking about the material that helps you understand the gravity and the stakes that each of these characters is facing when they share, the little information they might have.
Yeah, I wrote that down as well. That in those scenes of like reporting and investigating, there's really no music used at all. It's only in the like transition shots when we're going to a new location.
Mhm.
It's more of just like, okay, we're carrying you to the next scene. It's not like used to elicit emotion,
No.
like you're saying. And I think it works better for that because like again in a like lesser movie you would get like you would see government people spying on them or threatening them outright, and the
Right.
fact that they don't have that and they're as scared as they are makes it so much scarier. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Like,
Exactly.
because they know that Big Brother is around the corner, and they just like, even and if even if they're not, they feel that pressure because we're dealing with the White House, we're dealing with the president.
Well,
Like they
it's a
have
little
that.
bit more grounding because in
Yeah.
reality, whether or not somebody is watching you, believing they're watching you is a powerful enough deterrent.
Yep.
And that is really like what this movie, I think, is also kind of talking about and why it's trying to check such a large system of power. Is it sort of like it has people afraid to tell the truth, it has people afraid to do the right things. And there's no real proof necessarily that like those people are actually in danger, but it's able to elicit that fear in them. And I think that's an important like part of this story too, is like them as journalists also kind of bumping up against that. Because at first it's sort of like they're removed because they're not like the sources who are pretty close to that and who are feeling that stuff right away. But as the movie goes on and as they get closer to the truth, they understand that nuanced fear that like you're looking over your shoulder, whether or not somebody is there.
Yeah, and like you brought up too, like the different styles of the two leading men. Again, I think they don't ever say that in the dialogue, but like just through their actions, you get the different styles of reporting. I think like where the first introduction to Dustin Hoffman's character, like you said, he's stealing the story or whatever and like crossing out lines like that. And you really do, like, as a journalist, have to throw your ego out because that stuff is going to get rewritten and fact checked by an editor, by peers, like that. So I'm really glad. And Dustin Hoffman was right. That's journalism 101. You always put the most important stuff at the top, and then it gets more detail. It's like a pyramid, like, you put, and then as it gets lower and lower, you can fill in more details but it has to be really like short, most
Yep,
important names, most important story, and then you can drift off into other details. So he was
exactly.
right. He was right about that. But it was just the way he did it. Another example, I think, where Dustin Hoffman's like bending the rules, but I think it was a little more acceptable was when he's waiting for Warren Beatty's character to
Yeah, at his office, Ned
at his
Beatty.
office. Ned
Hmm.
Beatty, yeah. And I always get those names mixed
I
up.
mean, how can there
Yeah.
be two of them?
Yeah, Ned Beatty's office, and he straight up like lies to he makes a phone call to draw the
And she is
the
scheduling
sec.
him. Like
Mhm.
when he does this, she is taking him seriously and scheduling him, trying to
Mhm.
fit him in.
Yeah, but like he was waiting all day. That was kind of a dick move, and like and she said it was for that day, and he's clearly in the office. There's people coming and going all day, so it's like that. In that example, it's like, yeah, was it wrong? But at the same time, he has a deadline to meet, which we don't really have anymore. It's just that's another thing. Like,
And it does work, Ned Beatty
yeah,
is like, okay, I will give you this information.
these files. But yeah, just the fast pace of news. I feel like it really prioritizes just like getting the news out there as fast as possible, and
Hmm.
so there's not as much time for all these things that they're really focusing on in this movie. Like it was kind
Right.
of refreshing to see, like, yeah, we have to build the story first before we publish it. Like
Right, right.
it would be
Yeah.
irresponsible to just publish, like, they're constantly like, what do we have? We have these couple of stories that may or may not be connected, or but under scrutiny, like they could just, like, we would look bad if we posted it like this, published it like this.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
yeah.
And we do even see them sort of face that, where it's like they're up against that because they do have the misinterpretation where Haldeman kind of
Yep.
like screws them
Yeah.
and, they have to sort of like print a kind of retraction, but they don't
Yep.
give up on the fact that like just because one of their sources was like an unreliable source discounts all the other work they've done or discounts the other resources they have, right? They just need to solidify those sources even further now, understanding that like there are players in the game that can do things like that.
Well, and that was the scene I was talking about where like they had to get a third source. So even like as far as they went, it still ended up like not being correct.
Backfiring.
But
Hmm.
like that's why you have to go that, like, those extra lengths, because like you don't want it to blow up in your face, and like your credibility can be in question if you have to
Yeah.
do that,
And it's like, it's not like you inherently distrust your sources, but you
Yeah.
recognize that like your sources are people and people have motives. And those motives mean that sometimes they're going to be honest with you and sometimes they're going to have some sort of personal motivation that might be driving dishonesty. And so that's why you need to do the work, right? That's why you don't just take everybody at face value. But that is something that I feel like is pretty much completely lost today, where it's sort
Yeah.
of like, does this person, are they dressed kind of well? Do they have like a authority in their their tone of voice, they're probably telling the truth. And that's just like, that's not what critical thinking, that's not critical thinking.
Yeah, another story, like to speak of ethics, I had to do a story on this like local chess club that started or whatever, and
Let's
like
go.
a lot of kids were involved, and like again, I asked every parent if it was okay if I talked to their kid before I talk, you know what I mean? Like it's just that extra mile of like I'm not just gonna straight up you start asking quiz questions, you know? Like
Yep, yep.
you really have to just like all those things of like how could I look bad if I'm like this story comes out and
Integrity, right?
yeah,
Like integrity is something that, people were a little bit more particular about historically, whether or not that has to do with like how much time they kind of had. But it just sort of feels like because we're flooded with information, you can just bury a story that like changes your integrity rather than have to like always be defending and defining it the way that like historical journalists really had to. Like they had to maintain integrity, they had to lead with integrity. And that is definitely something I miss. But thankfully, science is still holds pretty
still
strong on
holding
that.
strong.
Thankfully,
Yeah. Some other filmmaking things I want to talk about. I love the use of the split diopter shots in here. Like
so cool.
it's not really showy. I guess in some instances it can be like that. Like you're trying
Hmm.
to see like what's in the background,
Right,
while what's in the foreground you get that depth of
the little
field.
gloss. Hmm.
But like in this one, I think it was really effective. In like most of the time, it was in the background is stuff we would be seeing in any other frame, where it's
Yes,
like people working, it's like news, like the TV, the one where Nixon's being sworn in, and it's that like really slow zoom in to Robert Redford. I really liked. There's a couple of those in there, and so it was a lot of the things we were talking about of like the secret agent. People were comparing it to this movie, and I was like, they wanted to be like this, but like the stakes in this were so much more well defined,
yeah,
and
yeah.
using those filmmaking techniques to really create a realistic sense of space. I mean, it got nominated for best production design, I think,
That's
as
right.
well. And so it's like I
Yep.
think that has something to do with it, where people really bought into this workplace,
World. Hmm.
because of those split diopter shots really helped with that. The bird's eye view shot, I think, when they're in the Library of Congress, I think,
Yeah.
and all the helicopter shots over the city, it really helped with
Very cool.
that Big Brother feel of like
Yep.
being watched,
Yeah. This big
from
world.
up
Hmm.
above.
Hmm.
And then I also just wanted to you mentioned all the the Oscars it was nominated for: Best Picture, Best Editing, um, Best Supporting, or that it won, but it also got nominated for was it Best Supporting Actress for Jane Alexander, Best Director, and
Sound.
Best Editing and Best Picture. So it didn't win those,
Right.
but it was a very heavily nominated film, and I wanted to read out all the Best Picture I always think this is fun. All the Best Picture nominees from this year.
Let's hear them.
And
Yeah.
so I think this is a famously stacked year
Dang. Okay.
well, I'll just read them off. Okay, so we got Taxi Driver, Network, another Ned Beatty movie,
Yeah.
Bound for Glory, Bound for
Okay.
Glory, All the President's Men, and famously Rocky won out of all of those. And like growing
Wild.
if you had asked me as a teenager, I'm like, oh yeah, Rocky, that's one of the best movies or whatever. And like being a film buff at this age, I'm kind of like it really could have went to like I could have seen this one, I could have seen Taxi Driver,
It should have
like
been Network, in my
Work.
opinion.
Yep, I could have
Yeah,
seen
Network
Network
is
in there too.
so good.
Yeah, and what a year for Ned Beatty being in both of these. You know what I mean? Like,
He prolific in his time.
yeah. So let's get into some of these other actors, because this is like a really filled out movie, I think, too, in terms of the cast. So we already said Robert Redford as Bob Woodward, Dustin Hoffman as Carl Bernstein. I really like every time they introduce themselves to people, it does kind of feel like a buddy cop movie where they're like, "Hi, Woodward, Bernstein. Hi,
Yep.
nice to meet you." Like, or like they're like lawyers or something. Like
Yes.
it just felt like a firm name, like Woodward and Bernstein. Nice to meet
And I
you.
like
Like
how their editor's always calling them Woodstein, like just
Woodstein. Yes.
combining their names. The time saver of that is so
That
fun.
that was hilarious. I love that line. You had Martin Balsam, who works in the Post, and I was like, I know that face. I know that face from somewhere. He
Yes.
is Detective Arbogast in Psycho. So,
Yes.
yep, that's
Yep.
where he's from.
It's true. Like heavy hitters in this bitch.
Speaking of Psycho, Patricia Hitchcock,
Yep.
is in this movie, Alfred Hitchcock's daughter. So there you
Let's
go,
go.
another psycho connection. Hal Holbrook as Deep Throat, who I really like. Speaking of filmmaking, how he's always in the shadows. Like, you really have to be an actor without an ego, knowing that your face is not going to be seen in this entire
Well,
movie.
especially at this time in filmmaking when like
Yeah.
lighting is actually really starting to emerge
Yep.
as like something they can even work with. So it's like still pretty like artistic in nature because it's not just like a given of like a full department that like everyone has their roles in now. Like people are truly still really designing it and figuring out how to make it work and manipulate it.
And I don't want to give this movie like all the credit for like this style of like meeting in a parking garage with the dark lighting across the source's face or whatever. Like, that
Right.
had been done in like noirs and stuff, like in
Of course.
alleys and street corners and things like that. But I really do think this is an influential version of it. Like, I still see today of like, we have to have a secret meeting and then it goes to the parking garage.
Yep.
It's like
It's the best place to do
it's
it.
just ingrained in cinema. I feel like the way they did it here.
Yeah.
And then Hal Holbrook, I'm like, I know that guy from somewhere. I looked. Creepshow, he's in the Crate story, and Creepshow was probably one
Mm,
of the best ones.
okay.
Also in The Fog,
The
John
fog,
Carpenter's The
yeah.
Fog. Ned Beatty, we talked about already a little bit. Jane Alexander, we talked about it a little bit. Stephen Collins, who I'm
Whoop.
like,
Whoops.
yeah. Who
Whoops.
would later go on to Seventh Heaven and is not spoken of
Fully
anymore.
disgraced, yes.
Yeah. But a young Stephen Collins, I'm like, holy shit, like, he's
It's
super
true, I
young
was
in
like,
this movie.
"Hold up, is that Seventh Heaven right there?"
And F. Murray Abraham was somewhere in this movie. I did not spot him, but
I missed him
yeah,
too, dang! But he's hella young, so that's why we we didn't
yeah.
see him because whatever style he must have been wearing at that time.
But another Oscar winner, F. Murray Abraham in this movie somewhere.
Yes. At least, we can see that, like, the Oscars sort of hold down that, like, the movies that ultimately find their way to being Best Picture nominations are stacked, right? Their casts are deep with, like, high-level quality actors that are all making, no matter how large or small the part is, feel invaluable, right? Like it has to be there. Because I do feel like, we could even go on and just about like all the women that they interviewed, each uniquely playing a different kind of woman in a world full of men in, these power dynamics, all dealing with these two male journalists, but still trying to like figure out a way to contribute, still trying to figure out a way to like, be valued and seen and heard. And I do feel like that was something I like noticed this time around. I was like, wow, there's a lot of women they go to for sources here, which like, in a misogynistic society, you'd be like, these women aren't telling the truth, so I'm not going to them. But it's nice to be like, actually, ladies see a lot because people underestimate what they're paying attention to, or people underestimate, how smart they might
Hmm.
be about what they're witnessing. And I really appreciated that in like all of the small performances that they go to when they're talking to the clerk over here and the secretary, the intern. Everybody that they tapped, all the small actors felt really good and authentic. Like they were still 70s people, so they look like real people.
Yeah, and I think like, like you said, they're behind the scenes in a lot of like the workforce at the time. That is where their jobs are. Those roles are, the bookkeepers and the secretaries and things like that. So they are the perfect source because they are not explicitly involved in like the dealings, but like they are just witnessing all of it all the
Yep,
time or setting up those meetings.
that's right.
And so to have them like on book, I really like the scene where the guy is like, they're kind of like tricking this guy. That they talk to the chick at their job and about her in bed with another guy, like, right, like, or
Yeah, like
at her house
being at her house, and he's like, I have a wife, a kid,
and
kids,
a
and a dog
dog.
and a
Yeah.
cat. He keeps saying that. They're like, the dog and a cat, okay.
And he wasn't even worried about like the story. Just like, it can't be that I was at her house. Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
my reputation's on the line here. Like, so
Exactly.
some sources of humor that I appreciate. I wanted to bring up too, like William Goldman, who's like a really big figure in screenwriting in the
Yes.
history of film and things like that, who
Yep.
worked on this script. There's like some stuff about like Robert Redford kind of like taking over. Like, Goldman wrote the original script, but then Redford like just was doing his own
Inserting
thing.
some stuff. Okay.
Because this is when like movie stars were starting to hold on to that power,
Right.
and exert that in their films, which fair. It's like, again, their names at the top, so they want to make sure that whatever they're
Have an
doing is like
input. Hmm.
signed off on them. But like, you look at his like IMDb, I mean, like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the Stepford Wives,
Let's go.
the Princess Bride, Misery, like just like a
A
really
heavy hitter.
iconic guy. And like, I guess one of his philosophies that like I fully agree, I think you would too, was that like you hope that the movies you're working on, I think this is the beauty of film, that because it's such a broad medium that is ingested by more people than any other, like in terms of books or even back then, that
Hmm.
like you hope that it's entertaining. But if you can make a movie that's like entertaining but also about something that's like, politically important, or
Matters.
historically important, like the events in this film, that's the home run. Like
Yes.
that's what you realistically, what you want to come out with at the end of the
Those are the
day.
movies that stand the test of time, ultimately.
Exactly. So I just thought like, and he's got books on like screenwriting and things like that. And so
It's awesome.
the fact that it's, I think, again, some of these heavy hitters working together, like Redford and him, and then the director Pakula, I think we talk about it all the time. You get so much high level talent working on the same project, and like it comes out,
Yeah. Yeah.
it comes out with the best results. That's like, doesn't always come out with those results, but like this is what can come of it.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 One other little fun fact I want to share before we wrap too
Yeah.
is prolific rom-com director Nora Ephron was married to the real Bernstein when the movie was coming out, not during the journalism piece. Maybe they were
Hmm.
dating, but they weren't married yet. And she wrote a movie about what their marriage was like. I don't know if you have heard of it or if you've seen it. It's called Heartburn, and it's starring Jack Nicholson and Meryl Streep.
Yeah, well,
Um,
that's and then so yeah, I haven't seen it, but I know about that. And
it's
so
wild,
another thing about that is that he had a reputation of being a ladies' man, even during their
which you
marriage.
can kind of softly
I was just gonna
feel,
see,
right?
like, so there's that line in the movie where one of the sources, like people was just talk to the women, she's like, "I've heard about you" or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, what did you hear? Tell me."
Yes.
That was like the one line of hinting, and like, yeah, he doesn't look like Dustin Hoffman though. I'm pretty sure. I like it's
He looks more like Dustin Hoffman than Jack Nicholson, though. I'll tell you
okay.
that.
Yeah.
But you know how it is, right? Like the movie versions of real people are always
Are never. Yeah.
infinitely better looking. But yeah, I do. I feel like that's such an interesting thing. Like just to think of sort of like again, culture and media for like a person to be this like journalist who's then married to this like screenwriter woman who is
Hmm.
also going to like culturally challenge things and like hold a kind of position where like the films she makes are also timeless, but
It's
in this
true.
other way is
There
really interesting.
there was a line on Hacks this week, which is I think it's the final season, or maybe there's
Yeah,
yeah, which I'm really sad about. But one of the characters, they were like, "You've never seen that show?" And she's like, "I'm just catching up on movies,
that's
Hollywood.
right. I haven't even
It's
started TV.
yeah." She's like, "It's such an interesting mix of culture and history and art and commerce." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's true." That is
It's
why we
true.
love the movies.
Yes, yes, and that is also why we love Hacks. So
I
clever,
love that show.
like the writing. My God, but
But yeah,
yeah, this.
what's your
Go ahead.
final thoughts wrapping up here? Like, I'm pretty sure we both recommend the movie, but like final thoughts on what you took away from it on this watch, being your second time, I
I
guess.
think
Yeah.
what I took away was, like when we watch lots of movies from the past, I miss this like level of a film, this level of deep casting, this level of deep high level talent in all of the most important roles of the production, and movies that sort of feel like they're doing two things at once. They're not just entertaining me; they are maybe
Hmm.
also educating me. They are also challenging me to think about my own values, to challenge, what I believe. And I just feel like though that's why I love movies and why I love art and why I think it's so important as cultural artifacts, because when it can do that, then it's transcending just something that can make money into something else. And I think that's, when I was rewatching this, I was sort of like, yeah, it moves a little bit slower. It doesn't have, the kind of like gripping whatever that maybe more modern movies have, but like it requires me to be engaged with it. And I miss movies that are sort of like, if you don't engage with this, I'm not trying to just entertain you like you're some idiot. Like I am trusting you're smart enough to engage with this material. And I think that's what I was taking from this, is that like this movie trusted me to be paying attention and listening to what it was saying so I could understand the story. Didn't hold my hand, wasn't trying to like tell me how to feel or think about these things. It was sort of saying like, hey, what do you think? And like giving
Mhm.
me the chance to relate to it. And I miss movies like that, and I appreciate movies like that. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even to what you said, like not holding your hand, that ending was like just on the typewriter. It's like that's how like the story ended in terms of like their reporting basically. It's like they just had to keep reporting on what was happening. They don't show you all these people going to court or whatever. And like I know they cut out a lot of the book that dealt with that. But I think because it happened so close to the events, everybody already knew how it ended. You didn't
Right.
need that context or whatever. So I think I was just like predetermined to like this. It has a lot of my beats,
Hmm.
journalism, history, good acting, good directing, and like it's. I don't see how anyone could say it's slow, even like as an old movie, because the reporting is so captivating, and even like the camera work maybe starts off slow, but at the end we're getting these like tracking shots of like
Yes.
Redford running across the room with the papers in hand or whatever, or like I love the when Dustin Hoffman is pulling out all of his notes, out of his pockets. He's like spilling out matchbooks and napkins and things and stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's how you had to do it before computers, you know what I mean? Or like recording devices that were available to us. So, like Spotlight is another good one. I just appreciate movies that accurately portray journalism, which I think has again gotten a bad rap in the last couple
Totally.
of years. And I
Right.
think like this movie does a case of without journalism, this story never would have gotten out. Like
That's right.
we need journalism to tell the truth.
We need a
Um,
free press, right?
yes, a free press that's not compromised and where they're constantly being attacked. I really feel for journalists right now.
Yeah.
And just the landscape, how fast the news media is and everything like that. But at the height of some of these movies, I think they do a good job of making a case of why we need journalists, and I think this is one of those movies that still has like excitement and action, and like those meetings with Deep Throat,
Yeah.
were always like had me on the edge of my seat too. So yeah, highly recommend this one.
Yes, and when you get a chance, you gotta watch Dick. It
It's on my
is
list now. It's
so
on my
great.
list.
It's so great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, all right. I think that about wraps it up for us. Let's remind the people where they can find us.
Get your fix and follow the show at We Stay Buff on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, YouTube, and TikTok. And you can follow me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B.
So you never miss a rep. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please leave a positive review. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. Follow me on all the socials at misfit_minded and my website at misfitminded.com.
We'll be back in 2 weeks covering The Devil Wears Prada. We got that new sequel coming out, and so
Yep.
we'll have to go back to the original, which I'm very excited about. Thanks as always for listening, guys. We'll catch you for another edition of Movie Buffs. Until then,